Sounds good. Thanks, Marco. And discussing everything about blockchain, I think it's worth noting what would be the advantages and disadvantages of blockchain. And I was wondering, like, maybe we can start with the advantages, with the positives.
Yeah, sure thing. Do you want to just flick through the slide, Bogdan, to the next ones? Um, so for all its complexity, blockchain's potential as a decentralized form of record keeping is pretty much without limit. So as Marco was mentioned, there's so many uses that we could use blockchains for. And one of the key advantages here is, of course, the accuracy of the chain. So transactions on the blockchain network are approved by a network of thousands of computers, as we've mentioned many times now, which removes almost all human involvement in the verification process. So you're probably asking, well, why is this good? Well, humans are renowned for making errors. So eliminating this factor in an accurate record, accurate record keeping process keeps information accurate. And even if a computer on the network were able to make a computational mistake, the error would only be made on one copy. So that's the key thing here, because obviously, as we said, you have loads of nodes all around the world, which each store a copy. So if a mistake was made, they'd cross-reference and check. So that's the first one. It's extremely accurate. Another huge advantage is blockchain technology's potential cost reductions. So in the context of banks, consumers pay a bank to verify a transaction, or a notary to sign a document, or even when you're getting married, a minister to perform a marriage. And blockchain eliminates the need for third-party verification, and that's the key thing to take here. It eliminates the need for third-party verification, and with that, obviously, comes with an elimination of the associated costs. So, an example here: if we look at a business owner who would incur a small fee whenever they accept payments using credit cards. If we use blockchain, it would eliminate the third party, which would be the banks and the payment processing companies. So it would lead to a reduction in costs. And finally, which I won't spend too long on because obviously we have covered this a lot, but again, is the decentralization and security. And that is just such a huge advantage, having that decentralization, so it can't be attacked, and it's very hard to hack. It is just such an important thing in blockchains. And this system inherently makes an irreversible timeline with data. And when it's implemented in a decentralized nature, it's just easy to track the movement of funds. So there's some key advantages to start with. Have you got any more to add, Marco?
Yeah, I actually have a lot. So the next one is the efficiency behind transactions. And this is very important. If you actually look at our banking system nowadays, if you want to send money, let's say you want to send money to your grandparents in another continent, or your parents or whatever, it can take a bit of time. You have to go through the whole process. There's the central authority that has to go through the KYC and all the process and checking, etc. It takes a lot of time. And so, for example, if you're sending, I don't know, a check or money on a Friday evening, you probably won't get it before Monday morning. And so it does take a lot of time, in an economy where people are very fast-paced, you need to go quick and be efficient. And blockchain gives you that. Blockchain works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. And so when transactions can be as little as 10 minutes and can be considered secure after just a few hours, you want to work that. And while I was talking about cross-border trade, a very good example was the use of the relations between Mexico and the US. A lot of people want to send money from the US to Mexico for the families through some type of remittances, and so they used to use Western Union. Western Union took some time. The fees were obviously very expensive, and some people actually switched to other type of cryptocurrencies, such as XRP, that allow them to be very efficient with it and not spend a lot of money. So the efficiency of the transaction is probably one of the most important things. The other point I want to talk about is private transactions. And we need to really understand this. The blockchain is, how to say this? The thing with blockchain is that they are anonymous, and they're not anonymous, they're confidential, and that actually makes a big difference. So for example, if for example you're trying to actually look at a random transaction, you will see all the information about the transaction, how much money was actually sent, the actual the keys, the actual link of it, and so to whom it was sent, etc., etc. It won't give you the information of the person because that's kind of ridiculous, but it will show everything around this. And so that is very important because people always talk about the blockchain technology being very private and that being true and untrue at the same time. And I find this to be very interesting because it can fight against lots of other issues, which we'll be talking later on. The other thing is transparency, which we'll have been talking before. Obviously, blockchain is an open source software. Anyone and everyone can actually view the code, can review the actual system, look at the security code, and also have a look at the whole process. The good thing about it is that no central authority can actually control the Bitcoin code or the edit or how to edit it, but they can actually suggest to change and upgrade the system. And if everyone agrees, they can actually do so. The reason why I kind of fast forward is that the last one is, for me, another very important point, and that actually is quite personal, is banking the unbanked. And we need to know that the blockchain doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about who you are, regardless of your ethnicity, your gender, or your cultural background, to use it. And we have to know that a lot of people around the world, and the data is actually 2 billion adults, do not have bank accounts. And so therefore they can't store their money or wealth in kind of a space. And that happens a lot in developing countries. And so the things that happen is that the only way for them to store their wealth is having a lot of cash and store it in the safe box at their homes, or put in some safe area or under the pillow. And that's, as we know, it's very easy to actually be able to steal that money. And so therefore there's been a lot of robbery and unnecessary violence by getting those cash, and that creates a lot of issues. And therefore, when you have basically the blockchain technology behind it, and if you use it with Bitcoin, you have a Bitcoin key, which allows to use a Bitcoin wallet. And that can be stored either in a piece of paper, cheap cell phone, or even memorize the actual code if necessary. And so that allows people to protect themselves, to actually increase their wealth, increase their whole standard of living, and do some type of progressive value for the world. And I think that's very important because from someone that comes from a developing country, I think it's very important.
No, 100%. Thanks, guys, for talking about the advantages. And I guess now it's good to also talk about the disadvantages of blockchain.
Yeah, sure. So obviously with all good things, there's obviously a little bit of bad things as well. So obviously with blockchain, we got loads of upsides that we both just mentioned, but there's also significant challenges to its adoption. So, you know how the world is. We have something that's really good, but it generally takes a while for it to be integrated into everyday society and used. So the roadblock to the application of blockchain technology, it's not just technical. The real issues here, unsurprisingly, are political and regulatory. But apart from that, it's also the thousands of hours that would be required to design the custom software and the back-end programming needed to integrate blockchain into current business networks. So if you look at companies now, that may be obvious that, yes, if they were to put in a blockchain technology, they could save loads of costs. They would reduce chances of internal fraud, but there's a big startup cost. So although blockchain can save users money on transaction fees, the technology of course is far from free. So the proof of work system that Bitcoin uses to validate transactions consumes vast amounts of computational power. And this is something we can touch on in another episode, but this computational power actually increases exponentially. So back in 2009, to mine a Bitcoin wouldn't cost you, it wouldn't cost you much in electricity usage or processing power. But nowadays, the way the network's designed, to get the same amount of reward for mining, it would require loads more power and loads more computational power. So, assuming electricity costs about like 3 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and then the mining costs exclusive of hardware expensive, it'd be about $5,000 to $7,000 to mine a coin, which of course is expensive. And that's just in the context of Bitcoin again, but linking that back to the real world, it does have its cost. You need to pay the fixed costs to start it, and then also the running costs. So with the running costs, despite the cost of mining Bitcoin, users continue to drive up their electricity bills in order to validate transactions on the blockchain. And that's because when miners add a block to the Bitcoin blockchain, they're rewarded with enough Bitcoin to make their time and energy worthwhile. But when it comes to blockchains that aren't Bitcoin, so say if we wanted to use it as just a secure store of information, if you wanted to use it for a secure use of without cryptocurrencies, miners would need to be paid or otherwise incentivized to validate their transactions. So that's what I'm trying to get at here. With cryptos, you have the incentive, but with non-cryptos, you don't necessarily have that incentive there. And Marco, if you've got anything to add, just go for it.
Yeah, there are some other issues, and one of them is obviously the speed and efficiency. And Bitcoin is obviously the perfect case study of the inefficiency of blockchain. So as we said, the Bitcoin proof of work system takes about 10 minutes to add a new block to the blockchain. However, at that rate, it's estimated that the blockchain network can only manage about 7 transactions per second. And that is very, very, very low compared to a legacy brand Visa, for example, that used 24,000 TPS, which is transactions per second. Obviously, we have other cryptocurrencies that were able to actually do the transactions even quicker, such as Ethereum, which we'll be talking a bit later. But for Bitcoin, that's obviously one of the big issues behind it, especially when a lot of people are actually mining. It's an issue. However, I think that in the future, and that's a good thing, such as the example of Ethereum, and with the development of it, and that's just in blockchain in general, is that we'll be maybe able to have 3,000 transactions per second later on in life. Another issue with Bitcoin is obviously the illegal activities, something that we obviously need to talk about and that the media likes to talk about a lot. And obviously with the confidentiality on the blockchain network that protect users from hacks and preserve its privacy, people are, it will allow illegal trading and activity on the blockchain network. And one of the most known example is Silk Road. So Silk Road was actually an online dark web drug marketplace selling weapons kind of place that operated from February 2011 to October 2013. That was shut down by the FBI because it had a lot of those activities, and the currency that was actually used was Bitcoin. And so that was the first time that people actually learned about Bitcoin, which is not really, really good when you have such an infant kind of technology. The last point that is an issue is regulations. And so regulation is always something that the space likes to talk about, especially about the government regulations about cryptocurrencies. And despite the very impossibility of ending Bitcoin and all the decentralized network and blockchain, the government trying to ban cryptocurrencies is actually possible, and a lot of countries have actually do so. For example, China has do so. They have a lot of illegal activities over there with mining. You obviously have India that have done so, and I think some other African countries. And so obviously that could be an issue for cryptocurrency, but that also could be a good thing, which I'll be talking a little bit later.
No, sounds good. Like you said, Marco, whenever people think about Bitcoin, or whenever I was thinking about Bitcoin, I was imagining this currency that's like illegal people use to exchange services and stuff like that on the deep web. But now it's definitely much more interesting, much more mainstream, given that all the retail traders have access to it, as well as hedge funds and Elon Musk, the techno king. And now, talking about Bitcoin this time, going from blockchain, what the advantages of Bitcoin would be, and then maybe we can talk also about the disadvantages.
So Bitcoin, a big advantage, although this is comparing Bitcoin to money, a big advantage of it is application. But of course, when we get onto other cryptocurrencies in general, which have more application than Bitcoin, some would argue that Bitcoin's application is quite limited. But comparing it to the context of having, instead of a £10 note, Bitcoin has a lot more application. So it's a financial instrument. So nowadays, it's just getting more and more complicated. You can buy futures of and derivatives of Bitcoin. It's also a method of investment. Of course, it's your standard medium of exchange, unit of account, store of value, which was some of the things we mentioned earlier on in the episode. But another big advantage is freedom in payments. So, like Marco was saying, with regards to blockchain, about how in certain countries you don't have access to somewhere, or if I wanted to send money to Marco now, who's in Hong Kong, I might be charged with a bank fee or something. But with Bitcoin, it's a set fee for however much Bitcoin you send, and you can send it anywhere globally at any time without restrictions. So that's a really big bonus. If I wanted to send money abroad, it'd be a lot easier to. Again, like blockchain, it's really transparent. So all transactions are secured and presented on the blockchain, again, allowing anyone to verify the validity of them. Again, we also have privacy. So personal information isn't displayed. But again, the possibility of fraud on payments or thefts and coins is eliminated. So it's sort of like it's private, but it's not, like Marco was saying. And finally, we have low transactions fees, which is similar to being able to, with the freedom of payments point, but just more generally, even if you were within a country, if I wanted to say send money on PayPal or Western Union or Swift system, I would be hit with higher fees than I would if I were to use Bitcoin. So if you want to talk about the disadvantages, Marco.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So for the disadvantages of Bitcoin, one of the big things that people actually talk about is volatility. And the volatility is what I call another day in the office. Bitcoin is traded 24/7. You're going to see like 20, 30, 40% down within 24 hours. And that's just a normal day. And so the uncertainty from volatility created from the constant trading in Bitcoin is always affected by different kind of events. So it's very, very hard to actually do so. And that will come back later to the lack of knowledge. That is an issue because you always need to understand the market before trading, which I guess it makes sense. The second thing is no chargeback options. That means that as soon as you actually execute an order, an exchange, a transaction, whatever, there's no option to actually cancel the transaction. It's going to be, you do it, it's your decision, you can't come back. And so that could be an issue if you actually put a wrong address, etc., and that does contribute to the decrease supply of Bitcoin, which I've talked before. The third one, which I just mentioned, is a lack of knowledge. And so that obviously often leads to a loss of private keys through the password. You're forgetting a password, you're forgetting what the actual process of having a private key is, and also the lack of knowledge of coins. And so that obviously just doesn't just talk about Bitcoin, but also talks about the whole cryptocurrency in general. You need to know the technology behind the different technologies behind the different cryptocurrencies. You need to know how to trade. You need to know the volatility behind it. And that is why sometimes you have a lot of issues around pump and dumps where people don't actually know what's happening. The fourth one is difficulty to work with merchants. For example, if you're trying to buy goods and services, most of the time it's going to be in the retail world. Was a Bitcoin, it's going to be very, very difficult. You can do so with some cards, but they're going to charge a lot of fees behind it. And so it's going to just you buy a good or service, it's going to cost you more money than if you actually just use cash. Another one is the average transaction time has risen on certain occasions, which is one of the points that I talked on the blockchain. With time, with more transactions, with and more mining, it's going to be increasing, and we actually hope that it will so. The last one is no provision of credit nor rewards programs. The good thing now is that these days, we've had a company called crypto.com. It has a card, or actually a lot of different credit cards. And so basically you can use this credit card to actually buy whatever you want. All you need to do is basically pledge a Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies as a collateral in your account. And so you can just go buy whatever you want. And so that could be very interesting. It gives you reward programs, I think on Netflix, on Amazon, etc. And so I think that's basically the future of blockchain and Bitcoin, which we'll be talking later on.